Bom dia, boa tarde, boa noite, or whatever the case may be. My name is Marcus, and I am the host of the Black Brazil Today YouTube channel, as well as the blackbraziltoday.com blog, where I analyze Brazil from the perspective of race. So the video I want to react to today is not a new video. It looks like it's a few years old, but I think it's perfect and it fits perfectly in the topics that I usually cover on this channel, as well as the blackbraziltoday.com blog. Again, at around 3,800 articles. If you want to check it out, I cover a whole bunch of topics there. It's been up since 2011. So this video that I saw it maybe about 4 or 5 days ago, and I wanted to share this because if you don't live in Brazil or in Latin America, this question of identity, racial identity, specifically Black identity, it can be a little bit confusing. Like if you look online and you say, well, how many Black people live in Brazil? And you can have a number that goes anywhere from 22 million to 122 million. Why such a wide, discrepancy? Why is there such a large difference in defining who's Black in Brazil? We know that the country has between 10, 2000, let's say 210 million people, maybe up to 215 million. But there's always a dispute between the purists who say, you can't count the mixed group as being Black, and the other group, the other side that says anybody who's mixed in Brazil should be counted as Black. That is the difference. In Brazil, when you use the term preto, meaning Black, people who define themselves as only Black in Brazil, they count for maybe 10% of the population. So we're looking at between 20 and 22 million. Yeah, about 20 to 22 million people. Whereas the brown category, the Pardo, Pardo, it's a mixed group. It's a group that some of that population is considered Black, and they have whatever type of racial mixture going on in their family. You have people who are almost white in the Pardo category. You have people who are just so racially ambiguous that you can't put them in one category. Then you have Pardos who are of indigenous ancestry. So this is why I say it's pretty difficult to come to a fair conclusion about how many Black people there actually are in Brazil. Then you go beyond that, and what may be Black for me may not be Black for you. This is a constant debate that's going on the YouTube channel here. People are constantly, oh, that person's not Black, that person's not Black. Oh, I got people look at my family look like her. So, I'm willing to just throw it up in the air and just say we can't really say how many Black people there are in Brazil. I'll just say that there's a large percentage of the population. How many? I can't say. It could be anywhere from 40 to 80 million. Who's to say? It's hard to say unless you see each person individually and come to your own conclusion, right? So, a lot of the problems that that are presented that make it difficult to know how many Black Brazilians there are is because a lot of Black Brazilians or people who you and I might see as Black don't necessarily define themselves as Black. Over the years that I've been going back and forth and studying Brazil, the term Moreno has come up just thousands of times. My first trips to Brazil, I knew a lot of people who I looked at in the streets of Salvador Bahia, in the northeast of the country, like, okay, to me, I see a Black person, but they'll be like, no, I'm a Morena. I'm a Morena Clara. I'm a light skinned Morena. So this term Morena can be confusing because I've said this before and over and over and over again. Anybody can be a Morena in Brazil if they're not blonde or redhead, right? A white person with dark hair, an indigenous person, a clearly Black person, a mixed Black person, a person of ambiguous ancestry, or I'll say ambiguous phenotype. Any of those people could be considered a Morena. So it makes the whole discussion a little bit more, it's not as clear cut as you might have in the United States, right? So I wanted to just react to this video, and I'm calling it I'm Not Morena, Brown, or Brunette. I'm a Black woman, and my dream is that more people see themselves as Black in Brazil, says Ana Louisa. I'm going to get into her video a little bit later. But for now, I want to put what she's saying and what we need to understand about this term Morena and put it a little bit more context for people who don't have any experience with the race and color question in Brazil. So this is Ana Louisa. I'm going to be talking a little bit about her in a few minutes. But again, what is a Morena? This is what I just said. A Morena can be almost anything except a blonde or redhead. You could be a person of mixed ancestry of whatever type of mixture, Black and Indian, Indian and white, Asian and Black, whatever it might be. A white person with dark hair. It could be a mixed person who looks mostly white and they have dark hair, but they look slightly mixed or whatever. Almost anybody in Brazil can be a Morena. Again, except for extremely fair-skinned people who have blonde or red hair. Everybody else can be considered a Morena if they wanted to, which in order to get to a more solid, precise number of what is black and white in Brazil, which that may be impossible because then you have to deal with the white issue. What is white in Brazil may not be white in other places of the world. So they were actually considering, well, if we took the word, a lot of people use the term Morena or Moreno. So then the question is, for people who use the term Moreno, if people stop using that term, would that person be more likely to fall over to the black side or over to the white side? And it's hard to say. There's been studies that's been done about this, right? So a Morena, you're going to hear about this. I've heard just hundreds of stories over the years about how people define themselves as being Morenas. I remember a story of a girl I was dating like a couple of decades ago, and she says how she was waiting for a taxi to pick her up one day. And I can't remember exactly how she told the story, but she said she was standing there waiting. And the taxi cab driver couldn't find her. So he called her on the phone. And he says, well, can you describe yourself? Because I can't find you. She says, oh, I'm black. She says, it was so negative. It means I'm a black woman. And he says, I still don't see you. And so then they got into it. They went back and forth. She finally had to describe what she was wearing because she was literally standing 10 feet from the cab, but he didn't see her because she called herself negative. Now, so when she described what she was wearing and the guy saw her, when he pulled up for her to get in the cab, he was just like, I thought you said you were negative. No, you're Morena. So the girl identified herself as black, but the cab driver saw her as being Morena. So this is how it can be quite confusing. Then you get into the Morenas who look more white, the Morenas who look more black, the mixed people who look Morena. It can be really confusing when you hear this term Morena in Brazil. A lot of the reason for this is because for years, Brazil, the racist tendencies of Brazil has made it so that so many different people who would be black people would not define themselves as such because they had a shame of defining themselves as black. And if you know how racism works in Brazil, for many years, people just did not want to be different. Don't call me black. Eu não sou negra, eu sou morena, eu sou mulata, eu sou mestiça, eu sou parda. All of these terms that can be, they're ambiguous. They play into the ambiguity of race in Brazil. All of them can be loosely defined as like mixed or brown, So what I'm saying about racism is for the longest time, Brazil has said, we don't want any black people here. We want all the black people to disappear. I've talked about that in numerous videos. So when you see the videos of the racism that goes on in Brazil, you can kind of understand why a lot of people don't want to be considered black. People in their own family would say, why are you defining yourself as black? You're not black, you're a Morena. Because Morena is said to be a softer, identity term. Nobody wants to be black, even though in the last, I'll say 10 to 15 years, due to black identity politics, you have a whole lot more people who are willing to identify themselves as black. There are some of those people who still say, well, I'm a pardo by color. I'm a medium brown, light brown, so I'm a pardo by color, but I belong to the black race. There's other people who see parda, morena, mestizas as those terms are completely separate from black. So taking this in consideration, you can understand why it can be so confusing to understand who's black in Brazil. And I'll say in the last 10 to 15 years, there's been a strong push for pardos, people who define themselves as pardos, meaning, again, mixed or brown, and those who define themselves as morenos to come over to the black category, okay? And that has changed. Not only have there's been people, in the statistics, we see this. Brazil used to be considered a white majority country, even though Brazil has never been really a white country. There have been some people who have classified themselves as white for years, and now they identify themselves as pardos or brown or mixed. Then you have people who were in the pardo category moving into the preto category and saying, no, I am black. I define myself as pardo for years, but I see myself as black now. For example, this is musician Jonathan Fair. He is from the new school of Brazilian musicians. He makes some incredible music, some instrumental stuff. He has mixing. He has elements of Brazilian candomblé music, a little bit of jazz. You hear some R&B, funk. You hear some hip hop in his music. Jonathan Fair is one of the best of the new generation of black musicians coming out of Brazil. Even he identified with this term, Moreno. Listen to what he says. This is taken from an interview or an article that I saw. I can't remember the website. I think it was a Gazeta, Brazilian website and newspaper. So he says, take a look at Jonathan Fair, okay? Just look at his picture there. He says, I discovered I was Black listening to the rap group Racionais MCs when I was 18. Racionais MCs is vastly important for speaking about, it's a hip hop group that's been out since I think like the late 80s, maybe early 90s. Legendary group. I've always said that Racionais MCs is like a cross between Public Enemy and NWA, if you're familiar with 80s and 90s American hip hop. So Racionais MCs had a lot to do with people coming to see themselves as Black. That's how politicized their music was. So he's saying that that rap group influenced him to take on a Black identity. He said, because being Black isn't just about having dark skin, it's also about being connected to your ancestry and your history. It's about understanding yourself in a society that privileges certain bodies over others. When I was younger, I vehemently denied my Blackness. Before I understood myself as Black, I liked it when people called me Morenino, a racist term used to make Black bodies invisible. Now he says Morenino. It comes out of the word Moreno. It's a diminutive of the word dominion. When you put an ino on something, it means little something or whatever. So in this case, it's saying he liked it when people called him a little Moreno, right? I also didn't date Black girls. He can speak to on volumes of that, as I've talked about this idea of palmitaging and Black men having a preference for white women. He said it right there. I also didn't date Black girls. I didn't like my mouth, didn't like my nose, my hair, and so on. I lived in a world of absolute self-denial. Today at 32, I think I'm handsome. This is musician Jonathan Fair. A lot of his videos and his music have like an Afrofuturistic theme to it. So he's gone from not identifying as Black, not dating Black women, to making videos and music that have strong hints of Black identity politics in his music, the videos that he puts out. So that's Jonathan Fair talking about that. But his story is, there's perhaps millions of people in Brazil who have gone through this development of identity of not wanting to be Black. Negro, no way. Like me, Black, not me. There's been probably hundreds of dissertations and books put out on this topic. This is Mayara Cristina Gomes de Brito. She was talking about the construction of Black identity in children, in the memories of teachers in the school space. So the name of this article is "I'm Not Black, I'm Morena, I'm Mahon," meaning I'm brown. So I just translated a bit of that dissertation. And this is just a small segment right here where it says, with the children, as the title says, I'm not Black, I'm brunette, I'm brown. It's one of the answers most often given by children when we start talking about identity, a way of denying or distancing themselves from any relationship with any physical trait that represents a Black person. And I'm well aware of the feeling and motive behind this phrase because it was my response for years during my childhood. The actions of omission and silencing in relation to racist situations, as well as the belittling of the physical characteristics of Black children, unlike what is done with white or light-skinned children, are a serious and recurring problem in schools. This is a consequence of the racist structure present in society, which claims to be harmonious and without prejudice of color, race, ethnicity, or any other similarity, but in everyday life only demonstrates how much it exists and how necessary it is to combat it through education. Now, the next piece I want to highlight, this comes from an article from Trip magazine, what they call Tripi. So this article is called Morena, No, Negra, right? So this is another article talking about people who come to see themselves as Black after being called Morena or being defined by other people as Morena. So I translated a small section of that article. It says, have you noticed that a lot of people call Black women Morenas? Well, make it stop. The thing I hate the most is when someone talks about me and says, oh, I know that Morena. In general, these people still raise their eyebrows like this. And if it were strange, or as if it were strange. The protest comes from Claudia Lima, 43, a Black journalist. This is Claudia Lima right here. Okay, what does she say? She says, I've heard this since I was a child. Some people think that calling you a pretty Morena is a compliment, but people, I'm not a Morena, I'm Black. It's as if Black is bad. That's the biggest racism. Claudia has lost count of how many times she's been in this situation. When someone says to me, that outfit looks good on you because you're Morena, I say, Morena, no, dear, I'm Black. So you could talk to thousands of Brazilians about this, how they went from being complimented by being called a Morena is like, okay, at least I'm not Black. But going from there to fully assuming being black. Like, I'm black. What's wrong with that? I love being black. So this is what I'm saying. An identity is like a process. It's a work in progress right now. So this was the experience of this lady right here, the Claudia Lima. There's another little piece that I included here, and it says here, let me see. Another example, Maria Luisa is only 3 months old, but her grandmother, housewife Eliane Moraes, has defended her granddaughter several times for the same reason. People come up to me and say, but your daughter is so morenina, to which I reply, no, my granddaughter is preta, meaning black. What's the problem? That's pure racism. To make matters worse, an acquaintance once retorted, wow, how mean of you to say that about your granddaughter. Yes, people are crazy. So this is what you get in Brazil. People, why would you define yourself as black when everybody knows nobody wants to be black in this country? And so people have to actually fight for people to accept that their personal identity is black, whether they've been black their whole lives or whether they made a transition into blackness after a little bit more self-analysis and just, having exposure to the information that would make them understand how Brazil sees them, how they'll be treated differently from people who are considered white in Brazil. This information is what usually leads people to becoming black in the future. So let's get into what Ana Luisa Jeremias had to say about this. This is from a video that she recorded on YouTube. It says, I'm not morena, brown, or brunette. Morena can be, brown. It can be brunette. It can be dark. I have to talk about the roots of the word morena in the future because it's really intriguing when you get into when you go into the Arabic nations, Portugal and Spain. There's a long history behind this term morena, which actually comes out of the term Moor, or in Portuguese, moro, right? She says, I'm a black woman and my dream is that more people see themselves as black in Brazil. Okay. So Ana Luisa is familiar with this struggle of becoming black because she went through this herself. I'm going to first read the description that she wrote on her YouTube video, and then I'm going to just overdub her video. She says, my dream is that more and more people recognize themselves as black in Brazil, that we have more black doctors, lawyers, engineers, and that my story can inspire many people. The fact that I'm black, poor, and adopted couldn't define my story, and it hasn't. In the past, I didn't know I was black. It's even ironic to say this looking at my physical features, but I was always the morenina of the class. When I discovered that I was black, I became stronger as a person and realized that there was nothing wrong with my skin tone and that I could occupy all spaces I wanted to be in. With all the difficulties of being raised in a poor family, I managed to finish high school, to go to college, study English, do an exchange program in the United States, get an MBA, and today I'm stronger and certain that the world has no borders and that there's nothing that I can't achieve. Okay, so this is Ana Luisa. The next section that let me see here. Okay, this is still part of her description. Let me keep reading that part. The last barrier that was missing for me to love myself the way that I am was to accept my natural hair. And I took that last step in April of 2016. It was the best decision of my life. Other videos and articles at Black Brazil Today have talked about this transition that a lot of Black women were making, like in the last 10 to 15 years, from going from using harsh chemicals to straighten their hair to wearing, weaves, extensions. I mean, people were just under the belief that, my hair is too ugly to go out in public looking like this. So she's also talking about the hair transition that she made in assuming a blackness. One of the first steps that she made was to take on her natural hair after probably years of using chemicals. She says it was the best decision of her life. With the change in my hair and the creation of this YouTube channel, I went to strengthen this image that we need to love ourselves as we are, that there is beauty in kinky curly hair, that there are successful Black people, and that everything that happened in the past will only determine your future if you allow it. I am an example of this. Hashtag descubra que é possível, or, discover what is possible. Whenever I hear about these transitions in identity, I think about this book that I read some years ago called Afrodescendente, Identidade em Construção, The African Descendant in Identity and Construction by Ricardo Franklin Ferreira. There was a section in this book that just stuck with me for all of these years. And he was talking about, I think it might have been like a seminar or something that was going on. And there was a group of Black women sitting, in the audience or whatever. And a white person referred to one of the girls sitting in the group of Black women that were sitting there. And because Black, saying preta or negra, was considered so offensive for so many people, he didn't want to call one of the girls in question that was sitting in the black group. He didn't want to refer to her as negative. So he said, "Oh, this is Morena." And a black woman who was sitting next to the girl says, "No, no, no, no. You don't call her Morena. Call her what she is. Call her negative." And then the guy, he responded, he was like, "Okay, I can do that. I just didn't want to offend her." So this is the atmosphere in Brazil. They've turned the term preta and negra. It was always an insult to define somebody that way. It's better to call them a morena. You know, she's pretty for a morena. She's so pretty, y'all. You can't be black. You have to be a morena. You're so pretty. Why would you define yourself as negra or preta? It's like automatically negra and preta is supposed to mean that somebody is ugly. So the flip side of that is if you're considered attractive, you're supposed to define yourself as a morena. So this is what that book is about. What does it say? O ser negro em uma sociedade negra or sociedade branca. O ser negro em uma sociedade branca. It's like the black being in a white society. This book, this obra, this work shows how Brazil camouflages its ethnic identity, which is the whole point of what I'm talking about with this young lady's video. So right now, I'm going to go into the video section of what she had to say. It says, "I'm not Morena, I'm black."
Meu nome é Ana Luisa Jeremias, eu tenho 33 anos.
My name is Ana Luisa Jeremias. I'm 33 years old. When I was 17, I found out I was adopted. I'm black, female, the daughter of a domestic worker with an unknown father. Born and raised in Sao Paulo, I graduated from a private university thanks to the discounted tuition I got after a social economic analysis, in other words, for being poor. As well as having an MBA from a business school here in Sao Paulo, I'd like to speak to black people without an identity. Boys, girls, women, men who still don't recognize themselves as black. I was once part of this group. I didn't know I was black. To be black in Brazil is to recognize yourself as black, and I didn't recognize myself. I was the moreninha in the class. I was always the moreninha in the class, and the saddest thing is to know that despite so many years that have passed, I still live surrounded by morenas. When I was a child, I didn't understand why. Even though I went to a public school, there were very few black people at school. Me, my brother, and a few other black people. It was only later that I discovered that I was literally in the wrong neighborhood. If I wanted to be with other black people, I should have been on the outskirts and not in that neighborhood. I was once part of that group. It's ironic to say today with my hair, my skin tone, but what happens is that being in Brazil goes much further than that, much more than physical features, more than skin tone, more than the size of the nose, more than the size of your mouth. To be black in Brazil is to identify yourself, to position yourself as black, and that, unfortunately, still doesn't happen in our society. We need to be more authors, more doctors, more lawyers, more engineers, more judges. First, we need to identify ourselves as black and accept ourselves in society. We need to tell the stories of successful black people to see that we are not alone on this journey. And with this, thousands of black men and women who don't see themselves can see that there's nothing wrong with being black. There's nothing wrong with the African blood that runs through our veins. And that there are, yes, successful black people, and that we need to conquer our spaces even more, because I can be whatever I want to. So those are the words of this Ana Maria, very simple video, very short video. But what she talked about is very important for people to understand who don't live in Brazil and this process of becoming black. I've said this, numerous times. In a Brazil where black parents who already have shame of being black, this discussion of racial identity of being black and what to expect about being black in Brazil, this is a conversation that often didn't happen in most households in which people were of visible African ancestry. This has changed in the last few decades. But what Ana Luisa is talking about applies to perhaps millions of people, which is why, as she said, where she came from, there's probably she's still surrounded by people who consider themselves to be Morena. So these are like would-be black people. You and I might see that person as black, but they may not see themselves as such, either because they might have fair skin or because they just have a shame of being considered black. So what I want to do right here is just go through a few more articles that just put this into context. This is from the original article at Trip magazine, Morena no, negra, okay? Then you have all of these articles that go a little bit more into this. Here's an article from 2021. Don't call me Morena, I'm Black. How the term Morena intentionally dilutes one's visible racial identity. 2017, she's not a Morena. No. Why you shouldn't be afraid of calling a Black person Black. But you're not Black, you're Morena. How the denial of identity is symptomatic of structural racism in Brazilian society. Mulata, Morena, not anymore. The power and liberation of recognizing oneself as Black. So these articles go on and on. Here's I talked about Jonathan Fair. Here's an article about his music and a nice music video that he put out. It was almost like a short film a few years ago. All of these articles, look at this. I'm 32, but I've only been Black for 5. This question of becoming Black is something that applies to so many people in Brazil, which is why I say we can never really know how many Black people there are in Brazil. A few more articles here. And I've talked about how racism just influences how people are going to see themselves. Who would want to be on the quote unquote losing team? Okay. You go to Black Brazil today and just use the keyword racism, you're probably going to see hundreds of articles that talk about this. You know, with the rise of the internet, Black Brazilians are becoming more aware of how Brazil really is versus how Brazil wants to present itself. The other thing I want to point out is, again, how the term Morena can be used, how you and I use it, how people see themselves. You could be looking at the same person and one person see a white woman, another person see a Black woman, and other people be just like, oh, that's a Morena. So mulher branca, white woman, Morena. But these are all the women that you can consider to be a Morena. These are generally white women with dark hair. Now, this is one of the articles. There was a video campaign that went on some years ago. They were trying to make people come to assume themselves as Black. So it says again, Morena, no, negra. But the term Morena can be used by white people, Black people, dark skin, light skin. Almost anybody can use the term Morena. You see a picture of who is this? Rihanna right here. And this is something that's going to be a little bit confusing for anybody. It's confusing for me, and I've been dealing with Brazil since the year 2000. Then you look at these Google images of what a Morena can look like. So mulher Morena, Morena woman. So all of these people can be considered Morena. You can have a darker skinned woman, a lighter skinned woman, woman with dark hair who may be of mixed ancestry, or woman with curly hair who has probably light skin, probably of African ancestry. So all of these women can be considered Morena, depending on who, you could say the eye of the beholder. A lot of people in the Black rights movement are just saying, look, Morena does not mean Black. Morena is a white person with dark hair. You can see the same thing if you were to do a Google image search on males using the word Morena. You'll find a bunch of white men with dark hair. So this was the book review that I was just talking about, and he's just talking about the development of Black identity in Brazil. So anyway, this is why I wanted to cover this young lady's video. It's nothing complex, but when you start dealing with the word Morena and racial and color identity in Brazil, these are the complexities that you're going to deal with. So I always like to keep talking about this. One of my first videos on the YouTube channel was just exploring how racial classification works in Brazil, you know, alongside color classification. So anyway, a lot of people have interest in visiting Brazil today, and this is going to be, I believe this is a video everybody should check out if they're interested in how race and color works in Brazil, because it can be kind of confusing. So anyway, wonder what you thought about today's video. Definitely drop a comment in the comment section, like this video, share this video, you know, consider subscribing to the channel if you've seen more than a few videos that you liked. Click on that notification bell, definitely helps with the algorithm so that more people can see my videos. And with that said, I'm going to end the video here and request that you all come back. Check out the next video that I post.